Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. So by the title of this video, you probably will have guessed that I'm here to talk about my baby. So this is my little cub. He is 3 weeks old now. Yeah, so basically I'm just going to talk about my birth and labour, and I'll probably do some other follow-up videos like what to take to hospital with you, what you actually need at hospital, because I think you find a lot of lists online about what you should and shouldn't take, and I don't, in my personal opinion anyway, I didn't use all of those things. And there were other things that I maybe should have taken. Oh, bless you. Bless you. That I didn't have. And obviously I think it does depend on the hospital you go to as well, but that's a conversation for another time. So basically on the 21st of November, I went into labour at about 6:15 in the morning. I just woke up, needed a wee like normal, and was just in pain. It wasn't that bad, it was just like period pain, but it was coming like off and on, so I knew there were contractions. And I'm not really sure why, but it does feel different than Braxton Hicks, you do know straight away. And I left it for about an hour just to double check that I was actually in labour, that I was continuously having contractions, because obviously I didn't want to phone. It does happen, but I just didn't want to like phone the hospital and go down and be like, oh my god, I'm in labour, and then them be like, no, you're not. So yeah, left it about an hour, phoned the hospital, and they said, right, come down, you go to the maternity assessment unit, and they check you over. I was only 1 centimetre dilated, my waters hadn't even gone. Shall we sit you up so you can see everything? Yeah, my waters hadn't even gone, and that was it basically. So they were like, go home, there's nothing we can do for you here. They won't admit you. Again, I do think it mostly depends on hospitals. Some of them it's 5, but for the particular hospital that I went to and for the UK, it's 4 centimetres. So they wouldn't admit me. I went home. This was probably maybe 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock, something like that. I don't know, my contractions were really bad, and I didn't know this at the time, but later on when I was re-examined, it turned out that he was actually spine to spine with me. Babies aren't supposed to be born that way, and apparently it's the most painful way for a baby to be in position, to be in labour, and I was in agony. So then we went home, and I just tried to sleep through it, to get as much sleep as I could, because I gathered, we were going to be in for a pretty long day. So come 5 o'clock in the evening, my contractions were probably about 2 minutes apart, and they were bad. So I had a bath to try to soothe it a bit, phoned the hospital, and they said come back in. So by the time I'd got in the bath and I'd got out and I'd got dressed and all of that, and then drove to the hospital, it was probably about 7 o'clock. I didn't really sleep much because of the contractions. Like you can doze a bit, but you can't really sleep through them. But I did try to sort of bank up as much sleep as possible. So went back to the hospital, and I was finally 4 centimeters dilated. My waters had probably gone at around about 3 or 4-ish. But your waters don't go like they do in the movies. It's not like, you know, just a gush or anything like that, and you just merrily drive along to the hospital. No, it's not like that at all. So so they go really, really, really gradually. Like, I hadn't really noticed when they had broke, because it's almost like, I don't really know how to explain it. Like, you just sort of slowly dribble water. Like, I was wet, I was soaked, but there was like mucus plug, there was like little bits of blood, so I just didn't question it. I didn't really think anything of it. But and also just the amount of pain that I was in, I wasn't really absorbing what was going on. But later on, when my partner went home and he washed all the bedded and stuff while I was still in hospital, he said, like, yeah, the bed was like soaked. So yeah, it's really not how it is in the movies. Went back to hospital. They said I was 4 centimeters dilated. I asked for an epidural because he was fine. I was just in too much pain. There was no way that I could cope with it. My contractions were nearly just over a minute apart. But the unit was quite busy, so by the time I got seen to and then taken down to the delivery suite, that was probably like another hour. And by the time I got into delivery, that was the other thing as well. I was in so much pain with my contractions that I was throwing up. And I literally threw up with every single contraction all day. Couldn't hold anything down, hadn't had anything to eat. I think I tried a slice of toast and didn't even get through half of it before I brought it all back up. Obviously tried to drink plenty, couldn't hold it down. So I was so dehydrated. When you get an epidural, they put like a cannula in the back of your hand, because they give you fluids and things that way. You can't get up and move around or anything, like you're just stuck in the bed. Because although a lot of people think that an epidural basically paralyzes you from about the waist down, it doesn't actually paralyze you. You're just very, very numb. So your legs are quite weak. They wouldn't be really strong enough to hold your weight. So yeah, they give you like special fluids and stuff to keep you hydrated through the cannula. Now, some hospitals will actually fit a catheter because obviously you can't go to the toilet. In this particular hospital, they did put in a catheter, but they only put it in as and when they needed it. So about every couple of hours, she'd come back, put the catheter in, drain my bladder, and then go. Just when she was doing her usual checkovers. So because it took them so long to actually find a vein, I'm not even kidding, I was stabbed about 4 or 5 times, because they couldn't even find a vein, and then when they could find a vein, it wouldn't take properly. I'm not really sure how it works, but they couldn't get it in properly. So it was kind of a bit of a nightmare. So by the time they did that, and then prepped me for the epidural, that took about 2.5 hours before I even had the epidural, and they can't do it when you're on a contraction. So you've got to like hunch forward, you've got to keep your shoulders like down and relaxed, but hunched forward at the same time. It's really quite bizarre. And they put like your feet on a stool, because you've got to like lean over your legs, kind of like curled up into a ball. It's really bizarre. And they can't do it when you're on a contraction. And when your contractions are like a minute, probably more by this point, apart, she kept having to stop constantly. And it was a nightmare. So I was on gas and air in the meantime. And it's great, actually. It makes you feel really, really hazy, which is nice when you're in that much pain. But it is so dehydrating. Like, you can only, for myself personally, could only have like a few sucks on the gas and air before my mouth was just too dry. But it makes you completely out of it. I honestly have no memory of anything that happened when I was on gas and air. Like, obviously I know there was loads of people in the room, there was people talking to me, but I couldn't talk back to anyone. And the only one specific thing I remember is they obviously check all your details and stuff. So she asked me what my date of birth was, and I couldn't answer. I literally couldn't talk. I was just too out of it. But by the time the epidural was in, it was fine. Because of the, I don't know, funny shape of my spine or something, she had to put it a little bit higher than they normally would. So it took a lot longer to work. Usually epidurals only take about 15 minutes to kick in. For me, it took an hour. But once it kicked in, it was great. So it comes on a drip. So they put like the needle into your back. It doesn't actually go into your spine per se. But it's like basically there. So they put like the needle in, and then they attach it to like a little plastic wire, and then they pull the needle out, the plastic bit stays in, they tape it up your back and then attach it to the machine. And every 10 minutes you get a button that flashes every 10 minutes. So you can press it and it will put more epidural in. And it's quite bizarre actually, because you can feel it go in. It's really cold and you feel like this cold spread across your back. It's really weird. And so after that finally kicked in, it's like having pins and needles. Couldn't really, like I could, but I couldn't feel anything at the same time. It was really odd. And I remember just sat prodding, like even your tummy, I was sat prodding my tummy and I couldn't really feel it. But it was great. It was really great. Because by the time that worked, I wasn't in any pain at all. And I'm really glad. I don't think I could have done it for much longer. So this point is probably about 9-10 o'clock at night. And so a couple of hours later they came and checked me again. I think it was about midnight. Maybe it was 11, and I was only 1 more centimetre. I was only 5 centimetres dilated. So my particular midwife, she went and spoke to, so you have your main midwife and then you've got other like nurses. There's the anaesthesiologist, I don't know if I said that right, who will do your epidural, and if you need a cannula she'll do that. The midwives and nurses can do it, but in my case, because they couldn't find a vein, she had to do it. They did try and get several different midwives and nurses in to do it, and nobody could find a vein. And you have a couple of midwives and a few nurses, and there's doctors around somewhere as well. And they just like to pop in and see how everyone's doing. What are we fussing for? So, yeah. I lost my train of thought. My particular midwife, who stayed with me all night, like obviously they see other people as well. There was 19 people on, well, labouring mums on the ward when I went in, and they all had their babies before me, and I was so upset. So she went and asked the like head midwife, whatever, the supervisor, if they could put me on a drip. So that's what they did. It's just like, I don't know, a lot of hormones, and it encourages you to dilate the rest of the way. So I did within a few hours. So by the time she asked and came and checked on me again and blah blah blah, that was another like hour or two. Can we get this hand out of the way so everyone can see your little face? So then, yeah, there was another couple of hours, and then by the time she came back and checked on me, maybe 2 or 3 hours later, I was fully dilated. Now, my mum had gone home at this point, because obviously we'd been at hospital for a really long time, and she'd been at work all day as well, so she was exhausted. So she went home to get a couple of hours sleep. So I phoned her to come back in, because they wanted me to start pushing at 5, but I got them to hold off for half an hour to give them a chance to get back to the hospital. And they came in and were like, right, it's 5:30, you're pushing now. And I was like, no, my mum's not here. Anyway, she turned up just in time. And so when you've got an epidural, you can't feel your contractions. So the midwife has to tell you when you can push. Oh, bless you. No more? Okay. So they sit reading the machine with all of its squiggly lines that can tell you when you're having a contraction, because they put these huge things, I don't know, if you watch One Born Every Minute or something, you will have seen them. They just strap these huge bands around you, but they don't stay put, so they've got to adjust them constantly, which is a bit of a pain. So you can't sleep, you don't get to rest or anything like that. Even once I had the epidural in, I just wanted to sleep, because obviously I knew I'd need as much energy as possible to push. But when you're getting checked over constantly, because he was in the wrong position, they tried to turn him around. So every half hour I had to change position. So it did take... Oh, I keep losing my train of thought. I'm sorry, this is so unorganised. I'm going off on random little tangents, but yeah, so it was 5:30. So I started pushing, and so she was telling me to push. She was feeling my tummy and looking at the machine for the contractions, and I stopped giving myself the epidural at this point because I wanted to at least feel a little bit, and I couldn't necessarily, there wasn't pain or anything, but after a while there was like a slight pressure down, it's in your bum really, you feel like pressure in your bum. Are you going to sleep? Should we put you down? You might scream. So I could eventually feel like a slight pressure, but nothing, I couldn't feel any pain still. I had been pushing for just over an hour, and then the doctors came in and were just like, you know, we're not getting anywhere, so we're gonna get the forceps out. So obviously it took a while for them to prep all that. So they did an episiotomy, which is when they just cut you instead of risking any tearing. And obviously, it's like everything, there's massive debates about whether or not being cut or tearing is better. but I would probably say being cut is better because it's like a, you know, it's a straight, even line, and it's, you know, it's controlled so it can be stitched together nicely. And then obviously the forceps are like these huge metal, like salad spoons. And again, because of the epidural, I couldn't actually feel any of it. I didn't even know that they'd cut me at the time until afterwards, when they were like, oh yeah, we're just going to stitch you up now. They didn't, to be honest with you, the doctors, they didn't really interact with me or say an awful lot. They were just sort of there to do the job kind of thing. Don't cry. And my partner, though, he was like, oh my god, I watched them put the forceps in and that was awful. But obviously there was no pain, there was just a lot of pressure. You could feel like pulling and tugging, but it wasn't too bad. Like throughout the whole thing, the birth was probably the only bit that I didn't mind. But when you have a forceps delivery, I mean, I think when babies are born, their heads are always a slightly funny shape. But when babies are born with forceps, the head is like actually squashed. So they have like a cone-shaped head. It's really bizarre. And they usually have a mark on their face where the forceps squeezed as well. In his case, he had a line right down his left eye from about mid-forehead to about mid-cheek across his eye. It was like right the way down. So, and that does go down within, I think it was about 3 or 4 days. But it meant that we nearly failed the site test. You do a lot of checks before you leave the hospital, before you can be discharged. And so they'll like check movement in baby's hips, and like the alignment of the spine. They'll do a hearing test, they do a sight test. They like, you know, just to check the responses and stuff. And the midwife didn't think that his left eye was responding the way that it should do, basically. So we had to stay another night and wait for the specialist to come and see us in the morning. But it was fine. And again, I'm going off on a tangent. I'll stop doing this one day. But yeah, so we did have a mark in his face, but it went down after a few days. And obviously when he was born, he was just put straight up onto my chest. And then the doctors just continued faffing around. Now, when I was pregnant, everyone said that I was absolutely huge and I was going to have a massive, like, 9-pound baby. And he was only 5'14". Oh, and he was born at 10 to 7 as well. 10 to 7 in the morning. Yeah. So then his dad cut the cord. And then the doctors just sort of went about doing whatever they needed to do. So they take out the afterbirth. Obviously, if you have a normal delivery, you're going to have to push to actually give birth to the afterbirth. I'm not really sure how they got it out, to be honest with you. I don't know how it works, but I had the afterbirth. And again, my partner said that was gross and it was horrible and it was huge, and it was weird. But I don't know. I didn't see any of this. And my legs were still up in stirrups at this point as well. You not want it? Okay. Hold this fluffy hair. So then, oh, and there was a lot of water as well. There was mostly water weight. For him being such a small baby, I just had an excessive amount of amniotic fluid. And then, yeah, I was stitched up and that was it. But you bleed so much. Like, seriously, do not underestimate how much you're going to bleed. I don't know if it was just because I had an episiotomy or whatever. So there was, like, extra blood from the stitches. But there was blood everywhere. So at about 8:30, so my mum and my partner went home to get some sleep, and we've, obviously, as you know, we've got cats, so they needed feeding. They've been on their own for quite a while. So he went back to, like, feed the cats and get some sleep and stuff. So I was on my own, and then they came in and said, it was about 8:30, they said, I'm moving you from delivery to another room. Now, what? Alright. Now I don't know if it was just because I'd had a forceps delivery, so I had stitches, but they moved me to my own room. There were other rooms in the hospital. I didn't know this, but there were other rooms in the hospital that are like 4 beds to one big room. So you don't get any privacy, but they did put me in my own room, which I was quite thankful for. And when she came in and she said, you know, we're going to move you, so can you, what are these noises? So can you, like, stand up? And I was like, probably not. Because I could still, the epidural definitely was, like, had worn off, but I could still slightly feel the effects of it. My legs hadn't entirely gone back to normal. So I did try to stand up, and maybe it was just like because I hadn't had a lot to eat. Oh, I was on a drip for fluids, so that had to go everywhere with me. Completely lost my train of thought again. Drip. Oh, they moved me. So yeah, I stood up, and I don't know if it was just because I hadn't, like, really had anything to eat or what, but I felt so lightheaded. I literally thought I was going to pass out. But as soon as I stood up, there was literally, like, blood just dripping down my legs. I still wasn't dressed or anything. I was just in the gown. There is no modesty in giving birth whatsoever. But you're in that much pain, or you're that drugged up that you just don't care. I literally cannot even count the amount of hands that were in my vagina over that 24-hour period. It was just ridiculous. So yeah, you bleed a lot. If you can, get the sanitary towels that they have at the hospital, because they are so thick, and I'm not kidding, you are going to need pads that are like the size of a mattress to absorb the amount of blood, unless you plan on basically just living in the bathroom and changing your pad every 10 minutes, which I don't really fancy doing. And they're extra long as well at the hospital. They're like twice as long as a normal pad. So if you can, they usually have them dotted around in the bathrooms in the hospital, around the labour ward. So if you can get them from the hospital, they might just give them to you, but they also do put them in the bathroom. So use them. So they came and got the bed from the room that they were moving me into. And I was still too lightheaded and like hazy to even dress myself. So there's 2 of them by this point. So they helped me get dressed and get into bed and then wheeled me down. And then I was pretty much just left to my own devices after then. Nobody really came and bothered with the baby. Nobody, like, he didn't need checking over or anything. But because I'd had stitches, like, I don't know, you run a chance of infection, and so they have to check you for, like, fever and blood pressure and all that. Because really, when you think about it, what happens is it is actually a trauma to your body. So people react differently to it, and you could have a bad reaction and anything could go wrong at any minute. So like every hour they come in and check your blood pressure and your temperature, and they would swap the fluid bags over. They did that a couple of times, I think for the first couple of hours, but then took me off the drip after that. Your partner can stay in the hospital pretty much all day. Everyone else has to abide by visiting hours. There are signs all over that say that children that basically don't belong to you can't come in the hospital, because children are known for carrying illnesses. Even if they don't have them themselves, they carry everything. Because kids like to touch everything. So they're not actually supposed to come into the hospital, but I swear to God they do, because the room's next to me, the walls are very, very, very thin. I may as well have been in a full room. And I swear they had kids in, and they either had 20 kids or half of those kids weren't theirs. Which I think is the more likely case. So yeah, there are like a couple of rules, but other than that, you just get left to your own devices. Really, nobody other than to check my blood pressure and stuff, nobody really bothered me. You can't take the baby off the ward. So like when my parents came, I had to give them very, very, very specific instructions on where to go, and then they still got lost and had to ask someone. Yeah, that's about it really. I'm sorry if I didn't explain any of that very clearly, because I know I did go off on quite a few tangents. But it's just what we do, isn't it? But if you would like a follow-up, hands out of the way. If you would like a follow-up video, or if you've got any questions, if I didn't explain anything properly, then I apologise, but do let me know, and I will correct it as much as I can. But as I say, like, when you're in that much pain and then end up on that many drugs, there's a lot going on, and you just don't absorb all of it, because you don't need to really. So I have tried to give you the information as full as I possibly can, but then I forget things and then I remember other things. So yeah, I do apologise if none of this video even made any sense, or if it was too babbly or whatever. But if you would like more information, let me know. And thanks for watching. Yeah, I'll do some more videos about hospital and that sort of thing soon. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!